Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about issue number 28 of X-Men, written by Jerry Duggan. But before we dive into the story, I want to ask you a favor. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and a comment to help the channel grow. So with that said, this issue opens up with a small recap of what Shiro had to go through during his time in Otherworld, and on a side note, they more or less got the basics of it right, with one major exception that they must have retconned for this issue. Because in X-Men Unlimited Infinity, they explore how Redroot was embedded into his chest. Basically, during a battle with Moira in a Blightswell facility, she used Redroot as a knife to stab him with after he took out the Brewmaster. But following that event, we also see how Shiro and Redroot both slowly start to die inside due to their unusual situation. But one thing about Shiro you need to understand is that if he made a promise to bring Redroot home, then that is exactly what he would do no matter the cost. So as he continued his exploration through Otherworld, he discovered that the Krakoan gateways had been closed for reasons that Shiro didn't understand and frankly didn't want to think about. So as his body grew weaker, he gambled on a way home through an unsavory individual, but once they arrived, Shiro quickly realized that it was a trap and chose to continue on. So with yet another door closed, Shiro thought back to when he first joined the X-Men, because on that day he told the team he was ready to serve someone other than himself. But in this chaotic place, his word was put to the test, and here, in Otherworld, Shiro would find out if his destiny really was to serve. So the mutant with the heart of a nuclear engine descended into the void and walked for days with his responsibility stacked close to his heart. He forced himself so much that he eventually became lost, and all his strength left his bones as the cold threatened to overcome him. So with his body beaten and his will fading, Shiro reaches into his own chest and removed Redroot with a single motion as blood erupts on the snow. As the mutant of the sun lay dying on the ground, all he could do was issue an apology to the one he promised to protect, for in his eyes he had not only failed Redroot, but he had also failed Arako as well as himself. So as Shiro's eyes begin to close, a voice calls out in the distance saying, "What is the end, my child, if not the beginning?" Because the last seed of Okara needs but one thing to grow, and that is mutant blood. For in Revelation's eyes, the magic has led Shiro right to his side once more. So in a display of power, Revelation healed the broken Shiro and told him to prepare himself, for they must march to war. And on a side note, this page looks amazing, and I love how Shiro is back in the mainline comics. So with that said, we skip over to the Orcus Control Center with Phylong talking to Dr. Stasis about a growing issue in Latveria. Because according to Phylong, Doom was clearly taunting Orcus, because since the mutant massacre, satellites had shown proof of Doom flaunting the same 5 mutant signatures in public. So with Phylong completely not having it, Stasis shows little to no concern about the growing Latveria problem, because from his point of view, he could care less if Doom keeps some mutant pets. Which was something he could understand, because of his relationship with Firestar. But just to cover his bases, Stasis states that perhaps he'll be more inclined to take this up with Doom after he receives a blood transfusion from Juggernaut. So with Phylong and Stasis going back and forth with each other, Firestar interjects herself into the conversation and says, during her time undercover on the X-Men, she was fully aware of the mutants in Latveria. But no one really worried about them because their numbers were low and their powers were inconsequential, and if you combine that with their lack of training, they were hardly worth their time. But see, just as she was saying all of that, Firestar was also sealing information right under their noses, information that could aid in the success of mutantkind. Now with the data in hand, Firestar quickly made her way to the door, under the pretense of having another appointment at the Jirich Detention Center. Because according to her, she was going to try to convince Cyclops to stand trial and plead for leniency, because with Cyclops as the public face, they could put the final nail in the Krakoan-era coffin, which in turn could save lives. So following that, Firestar takes off to the Gulag on Randall's Island to do whatever she can to slow Orcus's massive war machine. Because for weeks, Firestar played along with the monsters who were trying to exterminate her people, all the while trying to slow them down and slip information to the X-Men, like how we have seen earlier in this chapter. So as Firestar sneaks into the base, she slips into the locker room and knocks out an Orcus's guard with a thunderous swing. So with the woman out cold, Firestar puts on her outfit and jumps into action. Now Firestar knew she would slip up someday, and that would be her end, and to the best of her knowledge, the 5 were no longer there to catch her, but still, she persisted. So with Juggernaut in sight, Firestar made her move, because according to the doctors, the IV in his arm was the only thing keeping him down. So to fix that issue, Firestar used her ability to burn the chemicals to ash and slip away unnoticed. Now at this point, Firestar hadn't figured out what today's big lie would be, but she'd get there, or die trying. So a moment later she changed out of her stolen uniform and prepared to put on another show for the cameras, but this time with Cyclops. Now upon walking into the room, Firestar immediately went to work, and her words were harsh, but her touch was gentle. Now the reason why this is important is because both Firestar and Cyclops had some things in common, and that is they both were in the Scouts. So because of that, Firestar uses Morse code to apologize for not having freed him yet, so she implores him not to lose hope. Because her goal was to break him out today, but unfortunately Juggernaut needed her more, due to Stasis's plan for him. So with the messages relayed, Cyclops did his part and played along and made it look good. So while their conversation came to an end, right on time, Juggernaut broke out on his rampage. So with everything going according to plan, Firestar jumped into action and flew straight to Juggernaut's side because she had to do one more thing to cover her tracks, and that was something that didn't require her to fake, and that was losing to Juggernaut. So with that out there, Juggernaut came crashing through the wall and started to beat the heck out of Firestar, beat the heck out of the traitor. So with the colossal man ripping through the Orca soldiers, he eventually turned his attention to our hero and lifted her far above his head, ready to seal the deal, but right before he could do it, Firestar tossed a thumb drive into his mouth and informs him not to swallow it. So with that shocking event, Juggernaut stood stunned as Firestar whispered how the X-Men needed the information on that drive, and how she was still on the team, but unfortunately, she had no time to explain. So she tells him to get out of here, and go to the alley behind the Hellfire Club where he will find the X-Men, and as for her, she will work on freeing Cyclops. So in the meantime, she would need just one thing from him, and that is for him to throw her onto the floor and make it look good. So Kane did exactly what he was told to do, and nailed her into the ground before breaking out. And as he ran, Firestar watched Juggernaut escape and spread his wings. And even though her body was racked in pain, seeing Juggernaut leaving lifted her spirits for the first time in weeks. Following that, we pick up with Kane in the Morlock tunnels explaining everything to the rest of the team. So when they plugged in the thumb drive, they discovered all the files necessary to disarm the bomb in Cyclops' body. So with the files in hand, the team was ready to gear up for a road trip because Orcus had detected a group of mutants who had resisted the push into the gates by Charles. So with that information in hand, Shadowcat was sent in with the help of Miss Marvel. So with the team preparing to head out, we jump over to the Bloom Station, where we see Moira, straight from Otherworld, Omega, and Sentinel, who spent most of her time in Miss Marvel comics, all reunited talking with Firestar. And let's just say, they were all laying into her. Because according to them, Firestar wanted them to believe it was a coincidence that Juggernaut escaped from the Gulag on the day she happened to visit. But see, Firestar made sure to cover her own back by cooking the logs, because if they were to check the logs, Firestar made sure to make it look like she entered twice on the same day. And by doing that, she was able to cast the blame on Mystique being alive. And the way she was able to do it was by saying Mystique was able to use PIM particles to get Juggernaut out of his collar in his first escape attempt, and then she impersonated a member of the surgical team to sabotage the anesthesia. So with her explanation being airtight, Firestar knocked the blade out of her hand and exited the room. But before she left, she told the onlookers that if they changed their mind about killing her, she would be in her bunk-popping pain pills. So with that ballsy explanation, Nimrod had to admit that he rather liked her. But regardless of that, Moira still believed that Dr. Stasis's little pet, SunFire, had outlived her usefulness. Following that, we transition over to Shadowcat and Miss Marvel parachuting over Latveria. And on a side note, they make a point to say how the X-Men had never been pushed so low as to fly commercial, because Shadowcat and Miss Marvel had to stow away on a private jet, and then they had to phase through the cargo hold over the jump coordinates, just to get to where they were going. Now, Shadowcat had grown adept at landing without a parachute, because upon landing, all she had to do was swim back up from the ground. Which again, to me, is a testament to just how OP Kate's power really is. So once the two heroes made their way onto the ground, they were met by Wolverine. And during their interaction, Wolverine brings up how he wasn't too happy to see Kate looking like Ogun, due to their shared history. Now the reason why Wolverine was brought in was because the team thought Kate may need a friend to talk to. So as Wolverine and Kate go back and forth, Miss Marvel looks on in complete confusion, because in all honesty, Miss Marvel has no idea where she is, mainly because Kate really didn't want her there. So with Miss Marvel thinking they are somewhere in Europe, a voice in the distance calls out to correct her, by saying they aren't in Europe but instead in Latveria. And at that moment, we see Dr. Doom standing before our heroes with his X-Men team behind him. So with that said, this issue of X-Men comes to an end. Now let me say thank you for sticking around after my absences for the last 2 weeks. I don't want to bore you, but over the last 2 weeks, I have been on a trip for my anniversary with my wife. And when I got back stateside, I had issues with my YouTube account involving logging in. But as you can see, that problem has been fixed and I'm back and ready to go. So with that out there, this issue was an amazing comic, and I'm happy to see Shiro back in the fold of things. And let me just say, Shiro would make an amazing horseman for Revelation when he shows up in the next issue of X-Men Red. But anyway, down in the comment section below let me know your thoughts about this issue and what predictions you could have moving forward. So with that established, I hope you enjoyed this video, and please remember to leave a like and a comment if you want to see more videos like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.